She is a peace negotiator in the Philippines, the first woman to sign a final peace accord with the Moro Islamic Liberation Front in 2014. Recently retired as professor of political science at the University of the Philippines, Diliman, she now keeps busy supporting mediation initiatives as co-founder of the Southeast Asian Women Peace Mediators. With us for Thought Leaders, please welcome 2023 Ramon Magsaysay Awardee for Women in Peacebuilding, Professor Miriam Coronel-Ferrer. Prof. Iya, it's good to have you with us. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Kathy. It's my pleasure and honor.
So how has it been since the recognition?
Well, it's been busy. I mean, all these initiatives in different parts of the world really are trying to pick up speed because, as you can see, everyone's concerned about the state of the world. So last week I was in Nepal. They marked 17th year of their peace agreement. They're now into regular politics, and as you can see, there's still a lot of disappointment about how far they've gone. But more or less, they've moved on from the conflict that they've suffered in the past. Yeah.
Beyond Nepal, the state of the world, tell us more about the Israel-Hamas war. I mean, we're also looking at the prolonged Ukraine war, which appears to have gone on for much longer than we all thought, and the presence of Chinese jets ahead of the Taiwanese elections. That also beckons a discussion on peace.
True.
Where are we in the state of peace when it comes to the global space?
The 21st century was supposed to bring in, we had great expectations of the 21st century, especially coming from the late 1990s when you had the slew of peace agreements. And everybody thought that this really was the way to go, come up with these political processes where you will have a good reform agenda put in place through negotiations and not total victory or total loss for any one party. But unfortunately, what do we see in the 21st century? Very, very few comprehensive peace agreements, the Bangsamoro included. The last one is in 2016 in Colombia. So, and then we had these wars. And what we're also seeing is not just what was perceived as the predominance of conflicts within states. What we've seen in Ukraine and Russia, also now in Israel and Palestine, is precisely conflict between two states. So that means we avoided that since World War II, and of course we've had some other regional-based internationalized conflicts, but it's really very alarming because you have conflicts within states and now you have conflicts between states going on at the same time.
What's caused that? The few and far between peace agreements that we've seen in the turn of the century?
Many factors. We can see, for example, that even though the Cold War has ended, there's still a lot of geopolitics involved. There's still expansionist ambitions among some leaders, which and going to war has been one of the ways they've seen to be able to expand their influence. And then there's all of these political alignments where you see a lot of inconsistencies. I think the world has tried to build a regime of laws through international law, especially international humanitarian law or the laws of war. But what we can see is sort of double standard where it's applied and a lot of inconsistency and total disregard for what the world had tried to build over the last century.
Which brings us to the comprehensive agreement of the Bangsamoro, which makes it an even more significant milestone considering the milieu. Could you describe for us the environment in which that peace agreement was created and over a period of at least 4 administrations of the Philippines? And that
4 presidents.
4 presidents, indeed.
I guess we were at a point where there was a confluence of very good, an alignment of the stars, as I would say. We are a presidential system. Even if the president really wanted this peace agreement, which the late President Benigno Aquino III did, right? Other presidents did not, like we had President Erap Estrada going all out war. you needed the support of Congress, you needed the understanding of the Supreme Court. Of course, the Supreme Court will not compromise on the constitutionality of any peace agreement, and therefore we were guided precisely by that sort of parameters. And then you had the Moro Islamic Liberation Front really trying to find a just peace, one that they could defend to their own people, to their own constituencies. So I think there was that balance that was created. We found good spaces within the constitutional parameters to enable meaningful exercise of self-governance and really to be able to help the most underdeveloped, the poorest region in our country.
And that was 1997. That's when it all began.
Mhm.
But it was only in 2014 that you took on from Associate Justice Marvic Leonen.
2012, when he was appointed to the Supreme Court, right after we signed the framework agreement. And after that, we finished 4 annexes, which really went into all the details, how power will be shared, what powers the regional government would exercise, the structure of governance. You can see it's a very unique structure. They have a parliamentary system, and we as a nation has a presidential system. And as we know, our local governments are all elected through first the past the post system. In a parliamentary system, it's governed by politics and the number of votes governed by parties and the number of votes that political parties gain. So it's sort of like taking away the personalism that has defined national and local elections for a long time. And also really to encourage power sharing within the region. So we were able to do that. Also issues of taxes, revenues, collection, sharing of revenues from all sorts of income generating mechanisms, from registration, transportation, and so on. So these things had to be agreed on. A good compromise had to be found on each and every item. And somehow we did that for another 2 years until we signed the agreement in 2014.
And that was 9 years ago. So that's the change of life that you wanted to effect and which you now see in hindsight. So how would you assess it 9 years back? Are you happy with what you see on ground? What are you hearing from the Bangsamoros?
On the first measure, which is used globally, was there a return to war between the parties? And that's no, right? Have the institutional arrangements been instituted? Yes, although it's still in transition, we'll still have the regular elections, but everything is more or less being put in place. An electoral code, local government code, administrative code, which are very important in how the autonomous region will be governed. So the question of what to do with the weapons and the arms, I think we're very much delayed in that process, but it's going on. There's a timeline. It still needs a lot of follow through and maybe also accompaniment from the rest of civil society. And that, Mark, I think we can say that we are still aligned with the success stories globally of peace agreements that we're able to hold out.
What do you like most about what you see right now when you go to the BARM region?
The next generation, the leaders now, the young people in their 20s and in their 30s who are either inside the BARM government or in civil society and are really committed to building peace. I think that's a big difference from the previous generation. Because the previous generation, they were fighting the war in the 1970s. And here you find that this generation grew up during a political process when we were trying to build peace. We were addressing the humanitarian consequences of the war. And that's an entirely different way that they were socialized into some kind of social consciousness, right? And that means that we really, I'm really very hopeful that the next generation, including children of some of the political clans who are more progressive, who were educated in progressive schools, I think they would have a more, reform-oriented vision that will carry through some of the institutional mechanisms that we have that have been put in place in the Bangsamoro. So I'm very hopeful about that, and I'm very glad that I have met some of them, and they're all wonderful people.
And they're just about maybe a year into the transition phase, and then they go into their first elections at the Bangsamoro in 2025.
Yeah, and that's the scary part.
Why is it the scary part?
Because we know that the elections have always been violent, and even to a certain extent, maybe somewhat more violent than Bangsamoro, but also in provinces like some provinces in the north, which have also been quite have been this violent. But yeah, even in the last elections, we saw a lot of violence at barangay elections, very local level. And also because those who have held on to power in the past and have ruled in the old way and wish to continue with that kind of patronage, authoritarian style of politics, they're still there. They're still there, and they will contest this election, and they want the power back because now these are what the MILF is, what you may say the counter elite, right? And they have been given the chance, and it will be really very, very, how do you say, highly contested election, even a nasty one. But we hope that we will be able to prevail and still come up with a legitimate electoral exercise.
And that answer can come from the youth. The ones that you mentioned give you hope. That there will be change because it's them leading the next generation. So what would you advise them in preparation for what could be a scary 2025 Bangsamoro election?
I think in preparation for the elections, there's a lot of election education that must be done, and also some forms of organizing to be able to protect the ballot. But we know it's risky even to do that. In any case, whatever the outcome, whatever power alignments come out of that electoral exercises, I think it's very important that they are organized, that they have their civil society organizations and can be effective guardians or watchdogs of democracy and peace in the region. So I think they will have to play a very important role.
They could be a case study in how peace is carried out throughout the country. In terms of maybe a broader scope, peace competencies. The Department of Education has instituted peace competencies into the revised K-10 curriculum. To what extent do you think might that educate the young and in a bigger way, in the way that you hadn't found that support in previous generations? And might that make a change in the way we discuss peace processes?
I think very important. Peace education at all levels is very important. And it's very good that there are a good number of universities and schools that are really committed to putting into the curriculum at all levels through teachers education programs, for example, the infusion of peace education materials. And it's not just about global peace and all that, although of course that's the high politics side. It's about everyday peace. It's about how you deal with conflicts in your midst, how you handle your anger, how you find just compromises, your willingness to see the perspective from the other side, to do away with prejudices and biases that divide society. So all of these are all part of that kind of what does it mean to have a peace orientation. All of these are very important, especially in the kind of false information through all kinds of sources that really create a lot of divisions and hatred. So how to be able to discern, that kind of discernment is very necessary. And that's something that you should be teaching children. Critical thinking is something that's very much part of what it means to be a peace builder. And then at the higher levels where we do the research advocacy. So Mindanao State University's networks are, for example, trying to transform themselves as the National Peace University, embedding that kind of framework within the whole mandate of the university system in Mindanao. And that's something that should motivate that kind of commitment to address and build peace from all angles.
How do you bring that peace knowledge to the home? considering that parents of these children who may be educated with peace competencies may not be aligned with what really happens at home, unfortunately.
That's true, and we've had studies that show that children who were abused by their parents, like really treated badly, they end up, a good number also end up to do the same to their own children. And if you see, for example, your parents precisely not able to handle, not precisely anger, and also in terms of how they make decisions in their own homes, then it sets, that socialization really sets back some of the norms that we think are really the foundation for a peaceful society. But it's hopefully, that's why we need to we need to do this in all different levels. Media certainly has a role to play. The kinds of values, even through advertising, for example, what values are being put forward. I remember, for example, some time ago, there was this Milo, shall I mention the company? There was this ad of a milk chocolate company that showed children playing war games, throwing grenades, just war game. And I wrote a letter, not even to them, but just posted it somewhere, email groups, at that time, email groups were what we were saying, that maybe this is not the way to promote children who are strong, and so on. And that got through one parent because of the passing, just the mail. It got through one parent who had connections with the company, and they took away the ad. And went back to highlighting children in sports and all of that. So you can see, even in advertising, if we watch out for some of this, what values are being promoted. I think we've gone a long way, for example, in some of the advertising that has used a lot of women, for women's products, for example, or even for men's products, generally men's products like alcohol. I think we are seeing that transformation because there's already some consciousness in society watching over what norms are being promoted subliminally, even by advertising. So we can see all of these things. There's a lot of interventions that may be done.
So it's a matter of just activating that awareness. The awareness is there, but the engagement of the populace that you can do something to create that peaceful milieu.
Yes.
Whether you're just one person or maybe a family or a community. You did not expect to be the first female to be able to sign a final peace agreement, but you did. You made that milestone, but you did it with the help of, if I may say, a diverse group.
Yes, definitely.
Within the government panel and also with the Moros, because they also were represented. Two of them were women in the board of consultants, and you had already three women to back you up on any of the views you put forth, coming from Associate Justice Leonen.
Right.
What sort of dynamic had there been at play in discussing the final stretch to the signing of that peace accord, the role of women in the signing?
So let me clarify that what's probably the most accurate way to put it is the first woman in the world to sign as chief negotiator a peace agreement with a major armed group. Because there have been some women signatories, but they were not the chair or they were not the head of delegation. And sometimes, so that's probably the more accurate way to put it, right? And that happened in the 21st century, so you can imagine how long it took to sort of break that glass ceiling. So how was it during the negotiations? I think in the beginning it was very hard to introduce some of the gender provisions that we wanted to put into the agreement, for example. And also there was pressure on them from both the domestic civil society organizations and international community to bring in women in their team, right? So there was that kind of pressure. But somehow in the end, when we were able to make this breakthrough, and we sort of like the very presence of women inside the room normalized the participation of women in such high-level political processes. And I think that was important because when I became chair, their initial resistance was that they were not used to it, and that's something that they said. And then they got used to it, and
How
somehow
did you
it
respond
worked.
to them when they said, "We're not used to this"?
Well, they better get used to it.
You did. You said that.
No, I didn't say that. But who sits in the government panel is a decision of the government, right? We did ask them to bring in women, but it's their final decision. And they did say that their panel is representative of the different ethnic groups, but they happen to be all men. So in the end, it was through the consultants that they were able to bring in very qualified women as well. So I think that was that kind of normalization of that engagement, whereas before it was not normal, so they were not used to it, and then it became the very process itself created a dynamic where we were able to show that men and women can work well together with respect and appreciation of each one's contribution to the whole process. So we appreciate them also for that, because this was certainly, as you mentioned, a very collaborative process. Yeah.
But where do you find the justification then that a male-only panel might not be conducive to the peace process? Was there a specific instance where you
Yeah.
faced the wall?
We call
And had
that
to
Manels, right?
Yes, correct.
So Manels, there's a campaign now against Manels. Any forum where all are men is a Manel, and the question is, why is there no woman competent enough to be talking about these issues that they're talking about? And that's probably the same argument in peace negotiations. Is there no woman capable of being able to speak up and contribute to the whole process? Maybe they're not looking, or maybe the first people that they see in their own circles are precisely other men. So that's I think that's the whole point. And the second point is really the fact that because of how we were socialized in society, we were raised as women, right? And we somehow I mean, in your life, there are things that you could not that are very particular to women. Some of our biological processes, some of and also some perhaps also the questions of violence against women is very pronounced. Some men get raped, but there are ultimately more women who are raped, both by strangers and non-strangers. That's the data all over the world. A lot more women are trapped in low-paying jobs, unequal pay for the same kinds of jobs, or have unequal opportunities. That's the global fact. So we can see that this is the kind of perception that becomes that are more evident to women themselves. Perhaps they are more sensitive to this because it affects them. So what they bring into a process is precisely to bring this experience, especially women from the ground. That kind of engagement was very, very important for me, to be able to talk to the women in their communities, because it is their lived experience that has to be brought into the higher plane of politics. And without those pictures coming in, then what you have will be a very incomplete kind of understanding of the situation. So I think these are very legitimate reasons to argue that we shouldn't have Manels anymore.
But you also did qualify your observation by saying that women's presence does not necessarily mean they were the best advocates for women rights and equality.
Yes. And that's true. In the same way that any man could not be any man, right? And then we say, of course, we criticize a woman for being a token woman, but sometimes you also have token men, right? But the point is precisely, you have to get the best people and look for the women who are just as good or even better. Because if you don't have that consciousness, especially if the ones making the decisions are also men, then you only look within your the closest social circles that you have. And because probably in school you joined a fraternity, you went to an all boys school, then probably all the people you know are also men. So you think of them first, right? Okay, I need somebody for this job. Think about it. Then maybe you should ask other women, who are the other women or women you know, because perhaps women know other women more who are qualified for the job. But if you're not asking, then it's not going to happen.
You mentioned earlier the word breakthrough, that you were happy to have seen the breakthrough. Was it a series of breakthrough moments or just a major milestone that made you think, we're going to get this across? We're going to get to sign the comprehensive agreement.
Yeah. I think because we were doing 4 annexes, when we got to the second annex, which is the annex on wealth sharing, you sort of like, okay, we're halfway through the 4 annexes. It will be crazy not to finish the other 2, right? When you've reached halfway. And the President Aquino himself had a very good metaphor for that. The Heartbreak Hill in the Boston Marathon, if you remember, he was exiled in Boston, so he's very familiar with this, where you get to a point in the marathon that you have to climb up a hill, and that's the hardest part. And when you reach that, it will be silly for you not to continue with the marathon, right? Because then it's downhill. Although downhill may not necessarily be as easy. I mean, the last 2 annexes may not necessarily be as easy, but there's only one way to go, and that's forward on all of this. So if you can do 2 annexes, certainly we can do 4 annexes.
That's a lot of optimism midway. Did you ever lose your optimism along the way? And what was that moment?
No, I think it was essential for most part. First of all, a lot of people in government supported us. Of course, we had a good cabinet behind President Aquino at the time, and they really provided all the technical support that we needed, because there's a lot of technicalities about all the things that we were discussing. They gave us people who will do the coordinating. So that was very important, because if even your party is not competent enough to do this job, or does not provide you with all the data that you need, with all the coordination that you need, and the campaigns that you need to do to be able to really get a broad public consensus, then it's problematic, right? If the military were against this, then what kind of, we will see a lot of contradictions going on. Unfortunately, the police was our problem. They weren't as cooperative and kept violating some of the ceasefire protocols that have been put in place. So we did have problems with that. But somehow the Armed Forces of the Philippines, especially those who were colonels and then generals and actually participated in the ceasefire process, they understood the value of the peace process. And then you had a group of civil society people, including a lot of my women friends in civil society who were there to defend me, because social media was also quite hostile arena, where people just showed their biases against the process, even very sexist remarks about a woman leading this process. You get all of this stuff on social media. If you didn't have all of this kind of moral support also from your friends in civil society, even former students who will come up for my defense in interactive sites, I'm happy for that, and they gave me sort of like that kind of boost in very, very anxious moments when you see what's going on in social media.
So when you look at the successes and the opportunities that got you to the signing, when we come to discuss other issues like, say, the Communist Party of the Philippines, it's been 6 presidents past. We have yet to get down to the negotiating table with the CPP.
Mm-hmm.
Where can we start? Coming from the successes of the comprehensive agreement.
Mm-hmm. I think at this point, it's not easy to jump into like a peace table, on a peace table, and be put up a peace table right away. There has to be internal dialogues, a lot of engagement with both the Communist Party from people like us who want this peace to happen, and the people who have been accompanying, really watching what's going on, to talk to the people inside the movement and also to talk to people inside the government and really see how the paradigm can change, how the paradigm that each one is holding on to can change and make it really a paradigm that can make possible a viable political process.
What could be the breakthrough then to see that change in the paradigm? What needs to happen so that both sides could finally get to the negotiating table?
A lot of arguments will have to happen.
A lot more arguments
within a lot of examples. So I mean, a lot of arguments to show what perhaps, for example, on the government side, why is this kind of red tagging and extrajudicial killings and counterinsurgency? It may manage the conflict, but it will not end the problem. We will still have people joining the guerrillas, people dissatisfied with what's happening in the country, because there's really a lot needed to really change still our politics, right? A lot of disappointment still. So that's the kind of engagement or that we will need government to understand, that this current strategy may earn them some rebel returnees, but it will not stop the problem. Then for the Communist Party, New People's Army, I think they really have to rethink their Maoist strategy, which is to encircle the cities from the countryside. That process and the condition, both the internal and global conditions for a guerrilla army, at least in this context, a Marxist army marching into the streets of Malacanang or around Malacanang and taking power over. That's not going to happen. It will have to be through another political process where some guarantees, foolproof guarantees can be provided for them to participate in electoral politics. Then some kind of reparation for the victims. All of these different elements that usually go into a comprehensive peace agreement and some of the reform agenda, this will have to be discussed. And not really just to continue fighting and talking. We need some ceasefire, basically, also.
Well, the government has just announced amnesty for the ex-rebels, including the MILF, the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, among others. Do you think that will be a sort of a restart, if you will, as it's part of the comprehensive strategy for government on peace initiatives?
Right. For the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, they've already issued a statement praising this amnesty because it's actually part of our agreement that some amnesty be provided, but not for the communists. I think for them, again, from their ideological perspective, it's a kind of divide and rule tactic of government. So the amnesty alone will not solve the problem. It may, as I said, they may win some rebel returnees, but it will not stop the problem. It will fester. Maybe it will never be strong enough to really take over. And it's different with the Moro Islamic Liberation Front and also the MNLF because they're more concentrated in certain geographic areas. In the case of the Communist Party, it's the whole country. And so you get this movement, different influenced areas or fronts moving from one place to another, but never really getting to be such a concentrated force throughout the whole country. So that kind of ideology, a Maoist-inspired ideology, is simply not viable at this moment in time. And so a lot of rethinking really has to be done on their part. It's not to give up their reform agenda, but it's to give up the strategy, how they wish to. Of course, there's also a lot of compromises needed on the reform agenda because you can't have that kind of a society that's totally developed from your own vision 100% without taking into account the visions of other people, other constituencies. But in any case, the strategy has to change.
What about when it comes to the West Philippine Sea, with the rising tensions there? China, it's been 7 years since the arbitral ruling, and yet here we are. How do we move forward with the rising tensions and the presence of Chinese infrastructure?
I think we basically stand pat on the fact that international law is on our side. So that is the core position where we will get the support of the world on this. And then we continue to engage China, not to be anti-Chinese, which is very dangerous if it becomes like hatred of another people, right? In the same way that we worry when the Chinese government whips up pro-Chinese nationalism against us, right? So you might witness eventually some violence committed against the other community, which is not something that we want. But this is a question where we need that kind of a critical mass supporting us, and not just one side. We cannot rely only in the United States to do this, knowing how US-inspired geopolitics has its own complications, right? We always ended up being dragged into their wars in the past during the Cold War, and we don't want that to happen. So you can see China, for example, playing really a smart role in the international community, supporting a ceasefire and doing all of this facilitation, mediation in other conflicts around the world, right? So I hope that kind of experience in trying to build peace in different parts of the world also informs how they will address the problem in the West Philippine Sea. But it's very hard because they really if they have really this long term plan to expand, to be expansionist through military means, then that's really dangerous, right? That's really dangerous for us.
Could we leverage on our Southeast Asian neighbors, especially as you have already created that the mediators initiative within Southeast Asia? Could there be plans to actually engage and help with the problems at the West Philippine Sea?
Well, there are mechanisms inside the ASEAN, like the Code of Conduct on the Seas and all of that. That's also taking some time, but because each country has different foreign policy with regard to China, so it also complicates ASEAN solidarity on this issue, no? But it's each government. Each country in Southeast Asia also has that kind of fluid politics, domestic politics. You move from one leader to another, and they change their foreign policy. So there's a lot of fluidity still, and certainly ASEAN alone will not be able to manage the big neighbor in this region. I think it's really about a global alliance where that's committed to respecting international law, that we need a consistency in observing international law and not these double standards that we're seeing in different parts.
As you're probably learning from Myanmar, because it's the first engagement with the Southeast Asian Initiative of the group that you formed in 2020, as well as Afghanistan. I mean, what can we contribute to them, having achieved what we have with the comprehensive agreement in their own peace processes?
There's a lot of exchange of learnings across the different countries. Before this coup d'etat, for example, in Myanmar, they picked up a lot of good points from our ceasefire mechanisms, which they adapted in their process. But unfortunately, you had this coup d'etat, which really upset and overthrew the whole process before that. So, and then you have the case of Aceh, which had their peace agreement. So the question of an autonomous government, provincial autonomous government, and you have the problem still in southern Thailand, where you have very conservative ideas about decentralization and devolution and special autonomy arrangements still. So there's a lot of, in terms of just learning from each other, and also being able to build on strategies and approaches, building mediation skills, not only at the state level, but also civil society becoming active mediators in different levels. Then I think that's one way that we are able to strengthen and build a community of peace builders and mediators in our region, but also our region contributing to different conflicts in the world.
All this high-level peace initiatives we talk about really redound to what goes on at home. So I'm interested to know, as you've had a very supportive husband, Anthony, as you carried out the peace initiatives, what is it like to be a peacemaker and a peace builder at home? How do you keep the peace with your partner?
Oh
and
no,
your
we
kids?
are very, very. How do you say? We are very. At home, we all have our say, our piece. It's somehow like an open debate at all times. Maybe my children won't say that I am necessarily the best peace builder at home. But I think we are able to we work together in, we support each other, and they have supported me also, because I have always been so busy doing different things at the same time, right? Teaching, doing my peace advocacy both locally and internationally, and doing my research and so on. So without that kind of family support, it's really not possible, and understanding of what you're doing. So the household chores, for example, my children do their bit. My husband just loves to cook, and that's perfect for me because it's something that he likes to do. I mean, it's not something that you have to force him to do. It's something that he wants to do. So and I'm lucky in that sense, right? I guess it's also the fact that our parents also had their careers. His mother had her own career, so it was not new to him that I would also have my own career. And I think that's probably not the same for all women, where they would actually be discouraged to have their own careers once they have their children and so on.
Well, your parents must be so proud, because it's not just you who won the Ramon Magsaysay, but 20 years ago, there was Sheila. Sheila Coronel, your sister, who won the Ramon Magsaysay Award for Media.
For her work in investigative journalism. Yes, I suppose they will be very pleased, of course, right?
What was Sheila's reaction when she knew that it was your turn?
Well, of course, she was happy. And she was actually, I couldn't tell her until the announcement I couldn't tell anyone. I just told my husband, I'm getting an award. And he asked, what? And he said, secret. So Sheila visited the Ramon Magsaysay office because past awardees come over and sort of like engage the board, right? And the staff, and see what collaboration they can do. And they couldn't tell her at all, because it was top secret until it's finally announced. And so when she learned about it, then of course she congratulated me.
That's so rare for one family with the Ramon Magsaysay
I think
award.
I've had others in the past, the Davide brothers, and if I'm not mistaken, also one Thai brothers, but sisters, yes, first time.
Well, congratulations. Before we wrap up, as the season is coming, what to you is your definition of peace for Christmas?
I think the message of Christmas is really that kind of, this is a time for peace, and having the faith, keeping the faith that peace is possible, because it's an option, it's a choice. And if we keep choosing peace instead of war, choosing like finding a good just compromises instead of just one side taking all, like winner take all the time, then it's really possible. And I think Christmas is about sharing, and that's what we need. We need to have that kind of generosity of spirit to really find harmony in our societies.
There you go. The spirit of Christmas, in the
Yes.
words of Prof. Iet. Thank you so much,
Thank
ma'am,
you.
for a very,
Thank you,
very
Kathy.
insightful interview. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. My pleasure.
And catch us again next Tuesday at 9 p.m. Philippine Standard Time on One News. You can also check out the long conversation on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. I'm Kathy Yang, and this is Thought Leaders.